This is the second question. The Rambam describes Korbanos and other ritual mitzvahs that their purpose is a means to refine human behavior and gradually transition people away from paganism. He acknowledges that their origins in ancient pagan practices. Given this, how should we understand their continued intrinsic value today beyond their role in shaping and improving individuals in society? And he finishes by saying, I look forward to your thoughts and thank you so much. Before I approach your question, I need to tell you something foundational, which is that the Rambam also writes that mitzvahs are gzeirus. He writes it in the Meir Nevuchim. For example, when he talks about Shaluach HaKan, and he brings the Mishnah that says that that if somebody says that the Eibishter has mercy on the birds, which is why he says to say, take away the mother, you should silence them, the Rambam says in Meir Nevuchim that that's actually the reason. The reason why you have to send away the mother words, to have rachmanas on the mothers. But in the same breath he says that the reason the Mishnah says, Mishatkin says, because you have to always know that the time of your mitzvahs, the reasons for the mitzvahs are not the soft time. Nobody knows the real reasons for mitzvahs. The real reasons are gzeirus, as he writes in many places in Yad HaChazaka and also in the Meir Nevuchim. So when the Rambam gives reasons for mitzvahs, he says it's a requirement to give reasons for mitzvahs. It's a chiyuv to give reasons for mitzvahs, because in his opinion, the more we understand the mitzvahs and our own logic, the more motivated we'll be to do them. Parenthetically, Chassidus may have a different view than this, but this is the Rambam's opinion. So you give reasons for every mitzvah as much as you can, with the understanding that there's more. And ultimately, all mitzvahs are gzeirus. But kol she'efshar lasas leitam, tein leitam, the Rambam writes. If you can give a reason for a mitzvah, you must give a reason for a mitzvah. Now comes another point, and which is that the Rambam, as a philosopher, doesn't believe in Avodah Tzerach Kavaya. Means the Rambam does not hold that mitzvahs in any way, shape, or form serve God. They only serve man. The Mekubalim hold mitzvahs serve Hashem, which is why in Kabbalah you have very deep reasons for mitzvahs, like Yichudim, and like Berurim, and like Tshuva, and like Nisyanis, and even Dire B'Tachtonim. But to a person who sees Yiddishkeit only to better people, and he holds Avodah Tzerach Kavaya B'Tmiyah, that Hashem gave nothing from Torah mitzvahs. And when a Yid grows in Kiyam mitzvahs, it's only him coming closer to his own potential. And there's no such thing as approaching God. Those are his parameters as a philosopher. He basically has two timing mitzvahs, two reasons for mitzvahs, as does the Rasag and many other chokrim. The first is midas tevis, to refine character, which is what you're pointing out. And the second is deis nechenes, to refine not just our character, but actually our mind and our thinking, to have a proper philosophy. Now, this is a limitation that the Rambam has as a philosopher. Chassidus, of course, and Kabbalah goes much, much higher. And we like to say that the Rambam really was also a mystic, but he wasn't able to talk mysticism because in his time, it says in Sefer Hasichas Tav Shin, page 41, that the Baal Shem Tov said that Rambam was a big makubal, but that in his time it was very dangerous to reveal it. So the Rambam may have known higher reasons, but he was not in the position to reveal them, so he says what he's able to say. These reasons are real. In other words, these are real. You cannot throw these reasons away and say that they're secondary because you know more mystical reasons. These are primary reasons. The Eibishter created the world for people to be in the image of God, and it's an absolutely legitimate basis for Tamiyah mitzvahs to say that we should improve our character and develop good values, good philosophies of life, which are based on the principles of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the idea that human beings are created in the divine image and Tzelem Elokim, and that we should act accordingly. So this is a general insight into the Rambam's thinking. And as I mentioned in my previous question and answer, that we try to reconcile, to fuse together the Rambam with Kabbalah and Chassidus because the Rabbein was so concerned about there not being this split between the Rambam and Kabbalah and Chassidus that it goes back still to the Ramak, like it says in the footnote in chapter 2 of Tanya, V'heidel echach mi'Kabbalah, to the Rambam, from the Ramak on, instead of fighting with the Rambam, we tried to reconcile the Rambam and Kabbalah and Chassidus. So we would say that the reasons that he gives, midas tevis, deis nechenes, are stepping stones to the higher reasons of Yechudim and Berurim and Tshuva and Nisyanis and Dir B'Tachtenim. So his reasons are quite legitimate. Now when it comes to Avodah Zarah specifically, the Ramban beats him up. Wow. If you look in Vayikra, I think it's in Pasuk Tes in the beginning of Vayikra, that Rambam beats him up for saying that the reasons for mitzvah have to do with Avodah Zarah and early pagans and the whole thing, which the Rambam, of course, explains at great length in more than one place in the third chelik of the Meir Nevuchim. So firstly, I have a bunch of classes on this. I have 2 classes on Korbanos on my website. If you go to my Parsha section, Sefer Vayikra, Parshas Vayikra, go to the Parsha classes. There's a 1-class version of Korbanos, and then there's a 4-part version of Korbanos. I believe the answer to this specific question is in the second of those 4 parts. The way I explain the Rambam is very simple. Avodah Zarah is built into human character. Because what does Avodah Zarah mean? There's this one God who I can't touch, I can't see, I can't feel, and I can't influence. I have no control over him because he's real. So it's built into the human nature to try to gain some control over the heavens. And the simplest way to try to get control over the heavens is by using the technique of dividing and conquering. If you have many gods, one over the land, one over the sea, one over the sky, one over the earth, one over the fire, one over the water, and so on. If you can create the idea that there's divided powers, you can manipulate those powers. And the philosophy of Avodah Zarah is predicated on that foundational idea, which really means it's very hard to relate to the Eibishter without any form and without any division. So it's part of human nature to want to create more than one God so they can have some control over those gods. So although idol worship was created in the 3rd generation after creation by Enesh, and Adam Arishan, who was 2 generations before, already brought Korbanos, which is the question that the Ramban asks on the Rambam. If Korbanos are a reaction to Avodah Zarah, why did Adam Arishan bring Korbanos? And the answer is very simple, because Korbanos, in the Rambam's understanding, that Korbanos have to do with Midas Tevis and Deis Nechenes, Adam brought Korbanos not because there was idol worship in the world, but Adam brought Korbanos because idol worship in human nature. And there will always be idol worship in human nature, not the worship of a stone. But the idea that we want to create a division in powers, we want to understand there's more than one power so we can have some influence on those powers. So although the Rambam makes it sound like sacrifice is a reaction to Avodah Zarah, and when we left Egypt, we were allowed in quotes, to continue sacrifice because of that tendency, the Rambam is saying something much, much deeper. It's not about Egypt, it's not about our past, it's about human nature. Human nature says that there's only one God. Human nature says that you want to divide and conquer. But in reality, there's only one God. So Hashem took Korbanos, which was a mechanism that's always been used to manipulate the gods in the presumption that there's more than one, and we turn around and we sacrifice everything to one God. So we're not just sacrificing to one God because we were pagans and we made sacrifices. We're sacrificing to one God to sacrifice the very idea of paganism. When you bring a korban to Hashem, you are saying in that korban that although there's a part of me that has a tendency to lean towards the notion of multiple gods where that can be manipulated, I am declaring through the sacrifice that I don't believe that and there's only one. And that's a critically important thing. In other words, Korbanos are about Achdus Hashem. Sacrifice about the idea there's only one God. For the kind of person who's vulnerable to think otherwise. And we're all vulnerable to think otherwise. Now, after Mashiach comes, those reasons are no longer going to apply. But you know what? After Mashiach comes, even the reasons that Al Pi Kabbalah are no longer going to apply. This is the idea. Mitzvahs never change. But Taimei HaMitzvahs constantly change. The Rambam gives us Taimei HaMitzvahs for Zman Hazeh. And they're basically these 2 levels of Midas Tevis and Deis Nechenes, refining our character and developing good philosophies of life. There are much higher reasons for mitzvahs, which the Rambam does not speak about. There are ideas of Taimei HaMitzvahs which we're not going to know till after Mashiach comes. And at that point, the Rambam will agree with those Taimei HaMitzvahs, because at that point, the cat is going to be out of the bag, so to speak, that the Rambam is a big makubal. Whereas the Rambam writes in Mishnah Torah at the end that the reason for mitzvahs is l'das Hashem b'lvad. To know God, every mitzvah is going to point us in the direction of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's going to be the culmination of the way we do mitzvahs and the way we understood mitzvahs before Mashiach came.